You don't always need to process stock as a goods receipt. Sometimes stock or services may arrive without a physical invoice, or it could also be that your company policies are such that the people actually receiving goods or notifying that you've got services that have been delivered don't have to worry about the dollars and cents. That may be a function that's performed by admin and office staff as a separate exercise. In this case, to record the receipt of goods without an invoice, even though you may physically have an invoice in your hand, the processing path would follow navigationally as purchase orders, transactions, and a goods receipt note entry menu, and specifically a goods receipt note. Now, the goods receipt note, the first field or first question that we're going to be asked for is what order number or order numbers we're actually making a receipt against. This should be prominently displayed on the paperwork from your supplier, and bear in mind this paperwork may actually be an invoice, and your procedures may be that even though you have a costed invoice, the people recording the actual receiving only need to worry about the quantities. Now in this case, I would enter my order number in, and this may be order number 1524 from the paperwork. The system will go out and interrogate that order. It will automatically fill in the fact that it's from this supplier, and it will then ask me for my delivery docket. If I have just a delivery docket, then that's the number that I would physically enter in. I'd suggest if you have an invoice in your hand, then you would enter the invoice number in rather than a delivery docket number. There may or may not be such a reference on the invoice. You next have the option of entering a goods receipt reference number. Not many people use that these days, but there was a time when people would record every receiving that they did at the dock or receiving area into a book, and they would then record that book reference on the actual goods receipt note. If you don't have a procedure like that at the moment, please don't introduce one. Just leave the field blank. The receipt date will assume that you're doing this in a timely manner. Remember, the target is still to get the stock or record the fact that you've received these services onto the system ASAP. So this should be done on the day that the receipt or notification is actually received, and as soon as possible after that. You may optionally enter a reference as well. Behind the scenes that will post more detail into the general ledger and so forth. I would suggest for a goods receipt note, unless there is a particular notation you want to put onto the actual receipt itself, leave it blank, just to make life easier for the people doing the actual processing. It will serve no useful purpose unless there is some information they do want to pass on. The total stock delivered field works much the same as the value of a receipt, inasmuch as if you enter a figure into here, a non-zero figure, then the system will ensure that the number of items and or services that you have received corresponds to the number you've entered up on the front screen, just as a cross-check. Your supplier may actually give you this as a gross delivery quantity on their delivery docket. It's up to you as to whether you use it or not. Some people do, some people don't. There isn't a right or wrong answer to this. You also have the option, as part of the receipting itself, the goods receipt note, of producing picking slips. The picking slips would be used in situations where you have pre-sold stock out of this particular purchase order. So it could be that it's stock required for jobs or stock required for customer orders, or you can produce all of these reports in one go. You also have the option of producing receiving advices to help you put stock away, or also to produce stock labels as well if you are producing your own stock labels for products. You don't have to produce any of these reports. Their content and format will be customized specifically for you, so you would choose whatever the appropriate option is there, and that option will vary depending on what information you have contained, and also whether you're using the things like the advanced warehousing solution with portable RF units and so forth. If we then just move across to the products area, The system will have pre-populated all of the products that are outstanding on this particular order and tell us what the outstanding quantities are. You'll notice with a goods receipt note there isn't an option down the bottom to receive all of these items. The idea, philosophy is that because we've made the receiving process a two-step operation, the quantities need to be checked by hand. So you would need to physically record against each line how many items you actually received. But that's the only figure you need to enter. If we received all of those, the system will flag that and say yes, that particular item is now fully received. If we only received 10 of this item, of which there's 12 outstanding at the moment, you'll see the system hasn't produced or ticked that fully received button there, because there are still 2 items outstanding. But the goods receipt note process is basically finished at this stage. There may be services, but we're not going to complicate ourselves with that at the moment. If we're just talking about goods, all we're talking about is the number of items, number of products that have been physically received. No dollars, no cents, just the number of items. At this stage, you can simply hit the save button, and that will go and save that transaction onto the system for us. Also helps if you wait until the save is finished before you hit it again, which you can save things multiple times if you so desire. Once the goods receipt note is entered, you have the option from a menu of producing a goods receipt edit list. This is really just to confirm the details that you've entered up previously. You can run an edit list as many times as you want. It doesn't do any updating. It will just show you the information that you have physically entered to confirm as a final cross-check, if you will. And edit lists always come out to the screen. In this case, I'm happy with those details, and I won't tell you that some people don't even bother doing an edit list. That's a decision that you can make for yourself. And the post process similarly allows you to produce the post for just transactions that you have entered. You'll see it knows that I'm physically logged into the system. The system has my name down here in the bottom right hand corner, and I'm happy to only post transactions that I've entered, although I have the option of leaving that batch for user blank, in which case transactions entered by anyone could be getting updated as well. But I'll limit it just to the transactions I've entered, because there could be other people doing data entry on the system. And I'll continue at this stage. This will actually go and update the system. It will record against the purchase order the fact that items have been received, but without an invoice at this stage. And likewise on the stock system, our stock levels have been updated. It's important to note or be aware of the fact that these items will have come in at an estimated cost, and the cost estimate that's used is the cost that was on our original purchase order. That's the best guess we have. Now, for the people involved in the physical receiving side, out in the warehouse, on the receiving dock, whatever, that's the end of their process. They'd send the paperwork to the office for processing, but their job is done. They've done the goods receipt note, the system has been updated with the fact that these items has arrived, and now people can actually start to sell them. As a separate exercise, maybe on the same day, if you actually did have invoice with goods, but your procedure is you'll only enter it as a goods receipt note, or maybe a number of days later, you will receive an invoice from the supplier. So as a separate administrative process done by admin staff or accounting staff or whatever, they will actually have the job of matching that initial goods receipt note with a physical invoice that arrives in the mail. They'd do that processing wise, purchase orders, transactions, goods receipt note match, and they would enter the physical goods receipt note match itself. The first piece of information that they're going to need to enter is the supplier code. Now, they've got lookups for those, but I will assume, because they're doing this often, they'd know their supplier codes. Once more, it's assuming that the dates and so forth are all today. It will then ask us for the delivery docket that we're actually matching the invoice for. As I said previously, often the invoice number and the delivery docket may be one and the same, but they could be different. You'd record the delivery docket off the information given to you by the supplier on their invoice. In this case it would be 1122. Well, you'll see it's actually filled it in there for me. The reason it was able to fill it in is because we have a drop-down list of all of the delivery dockets that are currently outstanding for this supplier. In this case it's only that one. So that makes my life easier. The invoice number may be different. Hopefully it's the same. I'm going to assume it's the same. So all I've done here is just highlighted it. I've copied that. I'm just going to paste it in there to my invoice number. There's no shortcut for the invoice number field. That's going to be whatever has been given to you by the supplier. Once more, the system has automatically filled in the pay to supplier and the general ledger control accounts, which you shouldn't normally need to change. And as with the straight receipt processing, the actual invoice date could well have been prior, and probably is, prior to the receiving date or prior to today, because once more this physical process may take place days after the physical receipt has taken place. Would record the total value of the invoice. Now you'll see the system has come up here with a product total. Now that product total is on the basis that we have been charged the amounts that we assumed we were going to be charged from the purchase orders we raised for the invoice. If I'm looking at an invoice total that is different than $5,280, then that may immediately start to ring alarm bells for me. It could be a little bit more, and that could be taken up as freight, but regardless, at this stage I would enter in the physical amount from the bottom of the invoice. In my case it might be $5,300, but I've been pre-alerted of the fact that I could have a problem here. We'll just enter zeros in for those, and we don't need to withhold anything else for the ATO. We'll just come into the products, and the products have been filled in, as I said, automatically. We're assuming that the quantities that were being invoiced in this column are the same quantities that we said were received. If they're not, then there's an investigation that needs to take place. Was it actually a short delivery? Was it an over delivery? But generally, one would hope that the quantities that you are being invoiced for correspond exactly to the quantities that you actually received. Once more, the details have come in from the purchase order. If these details are incorrect, then they can be changed if that's what you need to do, but there may well be an implication to that, because if you are being charged more than you were quoted, you may wish to raise a supplier credit for it. And that's another procedure. Have a look at the video for supplier credits for that. There's also some decision, I suppose, in terms of if you have been overcharged, do you enter the invoice as it stood from the supplier and raise a credit, or do you simply adjust the supplier's invoice down and do the credit as a discussion with the supplier? If it was me, rightly or wrongly, I'd suggest that you enter the details in directly as they appear on the invoice and raise the credit, simply because that will make things a little bit easier to track later on if there is a discussion later on, or if there's an investigation in 12 months time or 18 months time or something similar, because once more you have this note log capability where you can record an actual image of the invoice, an actual image of the supplier credits and so forth that were raised, and answer those sort of queries. But if this is our total at this stage, we may well have been charged some freight. The freight account has been filled in automatically for me at this stage. All I may wish to do is say that I was charged $10 freight, and that was inclusive of GST. Whoops, that wasn't, so let's go and make it add GST, and we still end up with the same $11. Because it was asking for an ex-tax amount there, sorry. So back here, if we try and save this transaction at this point in time, we have a problem because we've entered a distribution of, or the total amount that we've got in the system is $5,401, and we said we only had $5,300. We'd need to go and investigate why that is. It could be, lo and behold, back on the product screen, that really should have been $400 rather than $410. That will have an impact on our total price, and likewise the amount of freight may have been incorrect. in my case, to make my own life easier, I'm going to make those two equal, because hopefully the supplier did end up with exactly the same figure as I would have. And now at this stage I can save this goods receipt note match, because what I'm doing is matching a single delivery to a single invoice. If you just keep your eye on that voucher number field there, when I hit the save, the system will allocate the voucher number. That becomes our internal tracking reference. If you have a hard copy of the invoice in your hand, you may hit it with a stamp or just write on it the fact that this is actually your internal voucher 3320. That's the goods receipt match physically entered on the system. As with the goods receipt notes, with that match we can produce an edit list that will show us all of the transactions that have been entered, in this case just from me or by me, that are currently awaiting posting on the system. That will come up as a PDF on the screen, and if I'm happy with those details, that is actually what I want to update, I'm happy to sign off on that. I'll go and do the physical posting process. The post process will update the creditors system, it will update the inventory system, it will update the general ledger. Be aware that with a goods receipt note and a goods receipt note match, because there is a period of time between when the goods receipt note is done and the goods receipt matching is done, when you actually get the invoice in your hands, if there was a price discrepancy for some reason, you may have already sold some of the items from the system, and we would have put those out at an incorrect cost. Now that's okay, the system will have put those balances or the amounts that are unapplied to the unapplied inventory accounts that you set up on your parameters in the first place for purchase orders. But just be aware of the fact that because of the nature of the processing that you do, if you're doing a goods receipt note entry and a goods receipt note match, that if there is a difference in price between what you thought you were going to pay from the purchase order and what you end up being charged from the supplier's invoice, if you sell items from stock, it's possible that they will go out costed incorrectly. But when you do the goods receipt note match, the system will try and adjust that as best it can. But that's it. We've now completed the cycle of receiving goods into the system, both with a invoice by doing a one-step goods receipt process, or if you're processing is either by choice or forced upon you because you don't get an invoice with goods. We've also seen how we can enter in a goods receipt note and subsequently match that with an invoice coming in from the supplier. That's it. Go and get that stock into the system. Thanks for watching.